You're with Sean Jeung and Where the Veil Grows Thin, an exploration of the sacred moments of our human experience in life and death, joy and sorrow, birth and end of life. It's the unscripted instant when the heart opens, the face-to-face moments with the divine.
I am really excited today to welcome another death doula to the show. Shelby Hawkins and I knew of one another, but had never actually met when we found ourselves present with the same gentleman at his time of death. It was an experience that will stay with me forever, not just because of who the gentleman was, but also because of the incredibly beautiful work that was done by all parties surrounding the event of his leaving. Shelby's calling for end of life work started when he worked overnight shifts in an oncology ward at a hospital in Denver as a nursing assistant. He said that he loved the work because it gave him a chance to help people feel their humanness during a time in their lives when they were being forced to look at the meaning of their lives. Then he worked in critical care as well as emergency when friends and coworkers started encouraging him to look at hospice. They thought that he might really like that work and that he was cut out for it. He moved to the mountains near Vail, Colorado in 2016 and started work with a hospice agency as a CNA. That was when he enrolled in the International End of Life Doula program and in almost no time found himself working with families as their guide through end of life. Death doula work is intense and time consuming. Depending on the needs of the family that you work with, it can be very much like being a midwife who packs a bag and moves in when labor begins until the baby is safely born and the mother and baby are doing well. A couple of weeks ago, a called Jeet was with me, and we spoke at length about what death doulas do as life coaches, how they can help families. I invited Shelby today because we both share a very strong interest in and comfort with medical aid in dying, commonly referred to as MAID. Colorado voters passed a law in 2016 that allows people who qualify to access drugs that, when taken properly, will hasten their dying. We are not here today to discuss the morality of the law or to judge in any way those who ask for it. And I believe I can say with some certainty that we are both strong advocates for a person's right to choose. What we'd like to do today is help listeners understand the difference it can make in the lives of the terminally ill and the ones who love them when the moment of death can be chosen, orchestrated, and shared. Shelby, welcome to Where the Veil Grows Thin, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Sean. It's really an honor to be here and talk about something that I couldn't agree more that you and I are very passionate about. And I feel like I think about how we didn't choose to be here, but because we're here and we are autonomous, free-thinking human beings, we have a right to make decisions about our own lives, especially when faced with age or illness that really compromises the quality of life.
I know that you've been doing this work for a number of years, and that, from what I hear, are quite sought out in the Valley and well revered with the work that you've done. What has been your experience with people who, maybe some people you've come into their lives and they didn't even know that there was that option of medical aid in dying, and then, bringing that to their awareness? What's been your experience with working then with the medical community to help someone access the drug?
A bit of a mixed bag, to be honest. There are certainly some medical providers who are very much on board with the program and are willing to advocate for a person's wishes. Um, and yet there are others, whether it's an ethical or philosophical or moral dilemma that they have, they are very reluctant to use their signature, their name, as part of the criteria to qualify. So you have to have two signatures by medical providers. Nurse practitioner or PA does not qualify.
Yeah.
So then you make the official request, and then 15 days later, still being of sound mind and having the ability to administer, basically swallow the medication, which is in liquid form, then that physician will order the prescription from a pharmacy, but and then it's usually shipped overnight, FedEx or what have you. But it's been a really interesting process for me to learn who those providers who are willing to do so, because while I don't think it contradicts the Hippocratic Oath in doing no harm, I think because it is still, even 8 years later, still so new for a lot of providers, and it's a tough thing for some to get behind. And so that's why, as a part of my doula work and advocating for their wishes, I like to go to those appointments with my elder, my person I'm working with, and sit in the room and help them express that wish to their provider and confirm and reassure that, yes, I've been hearing this wish for weeks or months now. This is not something they woke up today and asked for. This is a very consistent theme. And so it's good for me to have that relationship with them. And I think it does help that I have a bit of medical background myself, so that it's not just a warm body sitting in the doctor's office with them saying, yes, this is what I think they want.
Yeah. My experience in the hospital, when the law was first passed, I would often hear physicians say one of two things when it would come up, when a person would express an interest in finding out whether they qualified or learning more about it. One is, first, the physician might say, oh, we're nowhere near needing to have that conversation. And then the other side of that was, whether you don't have enough time left to do it. It takes too much time.
Yeah.
Which it doesn't. It does not take, the 15 days, yes, but it's really within a 3-week period, the person can have the drug in their home easily within a 3-week period. And so if they don't have at least the 15 days, they don't have enough time. And which is sad to me that somebody wouldn't think to have that conversation earlier. My experience also with providers was, providers being the word I use to talk about physicians and also PAs and nurse practitioners, was that they were a little reluctant to ever lay that on the table as one of the options right from the beginning. That we always have this. If all of these things that you're willing to try don't work, not only do we just have that we can then refer you to hospice so that your dying can be supported and comfortable and make sure that you have what you need and that your family has what they need. But there's also this option that you can choose when you want to die and what you want it to look like and who you want to have there. And then I would like to hear more from you about what your experiences have been when someone does want to talk about that, if there are family members that's new to them, or they maybe they they aren't comfortable with it. That process of helping everyone who might be there come get on board and understand the person who's dying, what their thinking is and why they would want to do it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I think it can be this sort of taboo topic for a lot of people. And part of that is because, one, I don't think as a society we're very good at all about talking about end of life wishes, end of life questions, even. Another part of that I think it's overlooked is that people often refer to medical aid in dying as assisted suicide or euthanasia. And I really want to steer the conversation into better language around it. So medical aid in dying or death with dignity are the two that I kind of fall back on, because I think those are more sensitive, especially when you're thinking of how we're in a mental health crisis, and suicide is certainly a very touchy subject for a lot of people. So this is entirely different from that. The other part of that is, in my work, I describe what I do often as I'm helping all of the people in the room, be it family members or close friends, advocates for this person who have a long history and companionship. I help them build a soft place to land. I don't know what kind of free fall they're in. I don't know where their fears and concerns are. And yet I do feel like we, as doulas and death workers, have an obligation to at least chip away at those conversations and make them so that they're not so emotionally intense. And part of that, and I think you had a really interesting topic about the timing. So just like a provider would say, oh, we're not close to being there as far as wanting to have that conversation or feeling comfortable with it. We don't know the timing. It's different from birth, where you have a clock to work with. Gestation is 40 weeks. And yes, I mean, both my kids were born 3 weeks early, but we still had some day to work with. You don't have that privilege with end of life. And I feel that if we do our job well, we have conversations before they become emotional ones. Of course, there are emotions involved, but if we wait and kick the can down the road and think that it's going to be easier down the road instead of now, we're doing a disservice to those people who are having those thoughts and really want to explore options. Just because you go down that road and you are accepted as mentally sound and have the ability physically to consume it, doesn't mean that you have to use it. You can even have it in the home delivered and in the refrigerator, and it's available should you want to, but until you decide, no one is forcing that upon you, even regardless of what ailment or prognosis you're facing.
It's true. We had talked a little bit about this the last time I saw you, that we don't know the statistics necessarily of the number of people who actually access the drug and get it delivered and then don't use it. That so many people that I've worked with just want the insurance policy in case it gets too gnarly, in case an organic death or a natural death from whatever is going to take them just gets too unmanageable or just takes too long. And they just get tired of waiting to go. They've lost the ability to do all of the things that give them joy, and they're just waiting to die. It's almost like they want the family to be free to move forward and get on with the process of then mourning the death of a beloved and looking at, okay, what is that? Who am I now? What does my life look like now? So that I think that if it's, I have said to people, look, if it's pain that you're worried about, if you're worried about your pain not being managed, your physical pain, and hospice is there and doing their job, that shouldn't be a worry. You should be able to be pretty comfortable that you're going to not suffer physical pain. That being said, I have worked in hospice for a number of years, and there were people that managing their physical pain at end of life was a real tightrope walk. So that can happen, that it's difficult, but for the most part, that shouldn't be a problem. But there still are people who want that drug. And I think, I love what you said about the language around the whole idea of medical aid in dying, because physician-assisted suicide, I never liked that. For one thing, the physician, they do the Hippocratic Oath, and they don't want to do any harm, and that goes against what so many of them feel that means. So I don't like that either, and I don't think they like it. And then there's the whole religion piece too, about the idea that if you're taking into your own hands the hastening of something that will come in its own time, if there's a religious background with the family, maybe not with the person, although the death where we finally met face to face, that was a very spiritual family, very spiritual in a solid dogma kind of way, and yet they were able to come to such a beautiful understanding of just what had been lost already and what was to be gained, and what, this whole idea of what waits for us, what's next, and to be able to have a strong sense of that, I think helped both the partner and the child involved understand that it was going to be okay, and it was the right thing to do, and it was a beautiful thing to do. And that does not mean without suffering the pain of grief. That is always going to be there. I think you can't get around that, but you can make it less frightening and more okay for someone if you have a strong sense of, I'm not scared, I'm not worried, I just want to go, I'm kind of done, pretty done.
That was magical, nothing short of magical. And it changed some of my language around working with people since then. And there were times that I would talk to them about the process and where we were. We, had done the initial request that was approved. We're still in the 15-day waiting period, and we are just sort of in this holding pattern. And I was curious how soon he would take it after it arrived, and didn't want to push that particular topic too much with them, just being very sensitive to all of it. And he kept referring to when the medication arrives, when the medicine arrives, when medicine. And that word, even of itself, didn't quite sit well with me. And I said, let's brainstorm, let's come up with something different. And I threw out potion and concoction and other things, and nothing really kind of resonated. Cocktail. And I said, what about elixir? And his eyes lit up, and he said, there's an opera called The Elixir of Love. And I can still remember. And then he followed that with, and it's a comedy. And the thing that I think really kind of gave me the impression that the spouse was going to be okay was in that moment, just before he drank it, they had on the bedside table a stemless glass. And I know you remember this, Sean. A stemless glass. And just before they mixed the powder in the suspension liquid, she picks up the glass and takes it into the kitchen. And we kind of looked at each other and thought, well, does this delay things? And she came back. She had put a piece of masking tape on the glass and wrote "Elixir of Love." And it was like this became more than just a receptacle. This was his chalice, almost this vessel. And it just told me that she was going to be okay, that she could contribute in this little, very thoughtful way. And from that point on, I refer to the MAID as the elixir. And it's in tribute to both of them.
That's so beautiful.
And in addition, we were looking out at these beautiful windows, and it had been stormy earlier in the day, and the skies parted, and just an incredibly powerful sky that the timing could not have been better. And I am so grateful that you and I got to share that moment with them.
Yeah, I am too. It will always stay with me.
Yeah.
Well, he was just such a dear, and I'd such a good friend, and I'd known him a long time, and I was quite honored to be called and asked to come back into his life, probably at least a year before you came into their lives. We were talking about, what is this going to look like, and what, how does it work, and what's okay and what's not okay. And boy, just that taught me that really timing, if you wait until someone has a diagnosis that's pretty like short term, they think, okay, you're not, it's stage 4, and it's not a cancer that we can, it's rampant. And that is, you can still have those conversations, but it's much easier to do right now with you and I. We could have the conversation. It's much easier for me to talk about, should these things occur in my life, and I want this, I want this, and I want this, and I want this, and to have those conversations repeatedly over dinner with my family, with friends, with those conversations are much easier to have, so that if something, I have it with my doctor once a year when I see my doctor. She's like, "You going to do a mammogram? Are you going to do a colonoscopy?" I'm like, "Nope, because I'm not going to do anything with the information. Not at this point in my life. I don't want to know." Anyway, everybody that needs to know, I think, in my life knows that I certainly would entertain having that insurance policy in the house, should I ever qualify for it. That's the other thing, is it's not hard to get if you qualify. It's just not easy to qualify. So when people say it's really hard to get, it's not really hard to get. As long as you have you have a diagnosis that a doctor is willing to sign a CTI, which is a certificate of terminal illness. And that's what gets a person admitted to hospice. You don't have to be on hospice to get medical aid in dying, which is another misnomer, but it's really helpful. And here are the reasons why, which is what I would say to somebody. Well, we don't need hospice. We have Shelby. We have you. We have Shelby. We don't need hospice. It's good to have hospice if you have this drug in your home, partly because it becomes an expected death. And not an unexpected death. And the coroner doesn't have to be called. And that's one reason. I'm sure there are others, but Anyway, I'm rambling. I didn't mean to go down that rabbit hole, but I think that having the conversations over, repeatedly as you ease yourself into, maybe this is something I'd like to think about.
Sure. And I do agree. I always advocate for having a hospice. I work parallel with them by choice because it does provide tools that I simply can't acquire myself, namely the comfort kit with the medications that are specifically for comfort, not at all to hasten or accelerate the dying process, but to maintain your dignity. Pain, certainly. Air hunger is another one. Anxiety, restlessness. Those things they don't have to be part of the physical dying process. And that is why I always want to have hospice alongside my services. And with the experiences that I've had in so many instances, they know me, and they know that they don't have to spend as much time there if I'm spending the time with them, because there are pretty simple algorithms as far as the medications, and I never act alone. I'm always wanting the support of the family and helping them decide, do we want to go to the morphine now? Do we want to do the Ativan for restlessness or agitation? All of those things are conversations that I will always advocate for, having the family feel like their voice is heard and that they are doing what's best for their person. And so it's unique to have the hospice tool as well as the medical aid in dying, because you may wake up one day and say, okay, I'm done being in the body that I'm in, and this is no longer enjoyable or even tolerable. It's starting to feel like suffering. And that's when I feel like the threshold of, okay, let's maybe revisit, is today the day to administer MAID and terminate life, because I don't want to see anyone suffer.
Yeah. Which makes me think of the people who do fall through the cracks of qualifying, who do, in my opinion, often suffer very prolonged dying processes, which are diseases like ALS and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's specifically, because they can't voice they can talk about it all day long up until the point they can't talk about it anymore, and then they don't qualify if they can't talk about it within that 15-day window. And so it becomes something, I was having a conversation with a good friend, a mutual friend of ours, who videotaped her loved one requesting it when she could. And I think that could go a long way to helping us move the law a little bit to help those people who are going to die from dementia or Alzheimer's to be able to access it. I don't know, maybe not, but I think it's much harder for a physician to write for it if the person can't have the conversation that you have been, there with people to have. And I have told people, we are the ones that need to bring it up, because the physicians aren't going to. Not yet, anyway. There's the rare physician that will actually be the one to bring it up, that it is an option, and that that it needs to be us or the patient or the family that needs to say, we want to talk about this. We want to have a conversation about it.
Even if you don't walk through that door, you have to open it, and just breaking the ice and letting them know that is an option, and kind of walk through those steps with them. And I always just say, you can keep it in your back pocket as long as you want, but you have to get it into your back pocket to make it available.
Yeah. And I think part of me would like to say, let's wrap this up pretty soon, this particular conversation, and see what kind of feedback or questions we might get from people about this conversation, and do another one at some point down the road to answer some of those questions. Does that sound like a good plan?
Absolutely. I'm sure it will invoke questions for a lot of people. And just to sort of button that up, I think people don't have a really good understanding of what the medication does, the elixir.
Yeah.
And how quickly and effectively it works. And it is the most dignified, peaceful manner in which people transition out of this world. And the circumstance where you and I were present, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, he was asleep and just faded off as peacefully as possible. There's nothing chaotic about it whatsoever. And
he set a very high bar in terms of what it can look like.
Yeah.
What it can be.
Yeah.
I think people probably want to know about, and I'm not going to be the one to say what the ingredients are, but we used to say in hospice that people were afraid of having the comfort kit in the refrigerator. They were afraid of overdosing the morphine with the dropper of, putting that much every so many minutes into their loved one's mouth. And the nurses would always say to them, there's not enough morphine in this house to kill your mother. There's not enough here. You can't do it with that alone. And so it's a combination drug. It's a compounded combination drug that is then mixed. It at one time came in a powdered form that was then mixed with liquid and administered by the person who's drinking it. They needed to be able to drink it, hold the glass and drink it themselves. Now, I think they just need to be able to suck the straw and get it in if they don't have use of their hands. And so it's a combination of 4 or 5 different drugs that will do it, and the cost of it. So initially, when the law was first passed, it was astronomically expensive. The drug they used was a drug that had been around forever, but and was very affordable, wasn't prescribed that often anymore. It was a barbiturate. But then all of a sudden, when it was the drug that was going to be used for this, it went from $25 to $5,000 or something. I'm not sure what it is. And you couldn't get it. The pharmacists couldn't get it. They just wasn't available. They couldn't, people were on a waiting list in line for it. Now we've dialed it in a little bit better. There's different pharmacies are doing it. There's still a cost, and it isn't covered by any insurance or anything else. It does need to be paid for by the family out of pocket. And I'm saying you have a more recent experience with this than I do, but at one time it was like $750. I think it's closer to $1,000 now, but it is something that people need to know.
Absolutely. And I think as doulas, we sort of put the wheels in motion and then trust the process that they will get what they want and in a timely manner. So it's nice to know kind of where you're building your network of, regardless of who's the provider is and the second signature. We will always help one another to make that happen for people.
Yeah, we will. Shelby, thank you. Thank you for being here today and for being who you are and for being an advocate, not just for medical aid in dying, but for all dying to be as good as it possibly can be and as peaceful and as beautiful, especially when we see it coming. We have that amazing gift to really and truly orchestrate and lay it out and do it the way we want to do it. So I appreciate your time and your wisdom and your insights and your experiences. And I hope that you'll be willing to come back again and talk again if there's something to talk about.
Of course. I feel like we are all here to serve one another, and this is just my way of doing so. And I can't help but think of what Ram Dass said: we are here to walk each other home, and that's what we do. So it's an honor to be a part of this, and thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. Okay. Bye.
Bye.